Greetings. You are listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology Radio, now streaming on the web and on YouTube, EA Zoom and YouTube. And this is our second show together here with Ari Moshe Wolfe discussing Chiron through the houses and signs. We are going to discuss Chiron and Taurus, or the second house, today. But before I bring Ari on, I just want to let you know, if you are a new listener to Guiding Stars, that there's a website available for you to learn more about evolutionary astrology. And within the website, there is a wonderful learning forum. It's a message board. It's free for you to participate or to check out what we've discussed in the past. There's a thread going on right now discussing Lilith, the original woman. And so check that out if you haven't. It's on the Goddess Asteroids thread. And there are many other things there for you to check out if you haven't. Also, if you're interested in becoming a more serious student, we do have a correspondence course available that allows you to become certified in evolutionary astrology, or you can just access the material just for your own studies. And more information on that is also on the website schoolofevolutionaryastrology.com. And lastly, there's a new book that just was released in the last week called Evolutionary Astrology, and it is a compilation of different subjects that all combined reflect the work of evolutionary astrology. So if you are new to this work, it would be an excellent book to get a hold of to understand the nature of the totality of this work, that helps you understand why your soul is here, what you dragged into this life with you, including the Chiron energy, and what it is your soul is here to do, and ultimately where you are headed. So we're excited about that book. And so I'd like to welcome Ari Moshe back to Guiding Stars. Welcome back.
Thank you, Kristin.
I'm excited to be here together. Step 2 out of 12 on our journey, Chiron and Taurus for the second.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to share before we dive in?
Nope.
No? Okay, perfect. All right, so before we discuss Chiron and Taurus of the second, I'd like to share with everybody what the asteroid, or what do they call it now? It's more than an asteroid.
I don't know. I thought it was a comet.
Comet, minor planet. Well, you know, the energy of Chiron is important to understand in your chart. And so I'd like to just talk a little bit about what it means by itself before we get specific with Taurus in the second house, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Chiron points to the place within us where, on the one hand, there might be a deep sense of being chronically wounded in a way that is otherwise necessary for our wholeness. This experience of woundedness, we can also say, being different in a way that inhibits our ability to function the way the rest of the world does. It sets us apart. It puts us in our own category. And there isn't necessarily a cure for it. There isn't necessarily a way to solve it and fix it, because the archetype of Chiron isn't really about fixing a problem. The unique signature of Chiron points to where that which is very different within us, which can be a very vulnerable experience of feeling broken, of feeling wounded, of feeling unable, not capable. That relationship which we hold to that vulnerability is the medicine that we produce. And the essence of Chiron is how we are in relationship to that part of ourselves that we can't fix, and moving beyond the need to fix into a more embodied, compassionate acceptance of our own condition. In that acceptance, something emerges that's completely unique to our own reality and would not emerge if we were not accepting our unique reality. That's sort of like the essence of the Chiron signature. It's also going to speak to where there has thus been peak wounding experiences in the past that affect one's sense of being different in this deep permeating way. It's also going to speak to where the soul might create wounding experiences for other people. And in that way, a soul can actually live in a perpetual denial, resisting any kind of acceptance or awareness of their actual condition. And in that sense, creating more hurt, creating more pain for oneself and for other people. It's where we can become masochistic and move into areas of life that in so doing will actually bring up more acute awareness and a connection to the pain itself. And this can be done in a way that's sort of necessary in healing. Like to do your Chiron work means you're tasting Chiron, and so you experience it. Or it can be a function of denial and sort of creating more trauma and pain for oneself through not actually embracing one's condition, one's reality. So that's the basic, Chiron. When we look at Chiron through the houses and the signs, wherever it's placed in your chart, if we tune in, ultimately it's where there's a unique medicine, and that medicine comes from a deep intimacy with self. And we're going to want to look at, why is Chiron there? What's the potential? What's the growth that's offered? And I really often feel Chiron has a very bodhisattvic quality to it, because it carries this vibe of you're facing your own suffering, you're facing your own pain, and nevertheless you're showing up and giving to the world. There's a very real giving quality potentially in the Chiron signature, and there's no going there without pain, without hurt.
Oh God, that was amazing, I have to say. I don't know, like all of it. Sorry, I'm just feeling everything that you just shared, just in a new way. I mean, every time we talk about an archetype, it seems like whenever we gather here, looking at a chart, I know anybody that's into this work, every time you look at a chart, it's going to say something new to you. And the same goes with understanding the energies and the archetypes within a chart. As we evolve, as we understand the layers and the depths of what they represent, then we can evolve as well. And there's a couple of things that you said that I wanted to repeat and share just again. And one of them is that you said, this is not something you need to fix. And it is a source of our greatest vulnerability. It's restated, I'm sure, all over your chart. It's not the only place you are going to see this vulnerability, because in evolutionary astrology, we understand the nature of our journey through repeating themes. And so there are many places to look for this theme, but Chiron it's a spotlight for sure. And the wounds that we carry can't be fixed because they've already happened, right? So the memories are in us. The wounds have occurred. It's like, I remember Jeffrey used to say that if, you got an arrow in your rib as a wild Indian in a past life, you might come into this life with a scar in that or a birthmark in that very same place as a baby. We're representing that wound of how you died, maybe in the back or stabbed in the back, and always having this pain in your back in a certain place where the muscles spasm, right? And there's nothing in this life perhaps that would have created the spasm, and yet you always have it in the central point in your back. There's this place called the Levator Scapulae. It's what allows the neck to go up and down, back and forth. It's kind of between the spine and your scapula. And, let's just say hypothetically that you did get stabbed in the back right there, and yet you have this chronic pain, and all the emotional stress that you carry is held in that place. And we also have learned in evolutionary astrology through looking at the chart that there are different places in our body that we carry the emotion or carry the stress or carry the wounds from the past. And so, that the wound is not something for us to fix. It's something, as you said, it's necessary for us to face our own pain and re-enter the wound so we can understand it, so we don't keep recreating it. And so those are the two. Everything you said was just beautiful as it relates to defining Chiron and why we look at it. But those two things really stood out to me, that it's not something to fix, but it is a place of great vulnerability that we need to like a door that we need to enter, a door into our pain that we need to understand, embrace, and ask ourselves, why did I need to create that experience?
Mm-hmm.
And to know why is how it works.
Yes.
It's how we end up freeing ourselves from a hold or an attachment to that pain. Why?
There's something so deep in that. I want to offer this one other point in Chiron, which is it's so hard for, subjective, individuated ego consciousness to have the full grasp and awareness of why we've manifested various conditions. And I've observed, and I really find this true for myself. Maybe because I have Chiron and Taurus, and maybe I'll use my chart. I don't know. We'll see. That so often the place where there is a sense of brokenness and woundedness, if we trace the history back, and this is not always the case, but sometimes there's been a deep need to become humbled.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if a soul has gone so far in a certain direction, they might manifest a reality where they are wounded or broken in some way to make them humble. And so it's like sometimes it's kind of healing any kind of arrogance or laziness or sloppiness in one's behavior and really becoming true and authentic in oneself. I identify with that strongly. Maybe I'll just mention my chart. So I have Chiron in Taurus in the 9th house. Taurus rules the neck. We'll talk about Taurus in a moment, but I've had chronic, neck pain my whole life. And in particular, during times when I'm in a transition and I'm, not really sure where I'm going to go, but I need to still do sessions or make money and take care of my body. Taurus in the 9th house. There's been a trauma and a repeated crisis in my life of literally moving, 9th house, traveling, but not having all of my basic security needs met. And there's like a stress that just happens in those times where my neck just goes out. It's been happening for years. And, now when it happens, I understand that the medicine here is Taurus. Slow down, connect with the body's needs, and embody. Feel the pain. Don't just move. Feel your own reality. And there's an embodiment and there's a presence for the journey that opens up for me when I allow myself to go slow. When I allow myself to really connect with my body, with my feelings, with my heart. And that's one of my Taurus and 9th house lessons, that the way that I get there is actually the place that I'm going to. The way that I move is my destination. And I would say in past lives, and this is kind of all over my chart, but Taurus and 9th house, past lives, there's been a lot of movement and maybe having very fixed beliefs or ideas, and strong concepts about truth and reality and who I'm supposed to be and what's true. And now I don't find any of that really has any use for me, because my ideas and my concepts and how I fixed my values, it doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't actually make my neck feel good. So there's something humbling for me in finding a way of truth that doesn't require possessiveness. It doesn't mean holding on to a fixed idea, but really being embodied. So let's use that to talk about Taurus, 2nd house. Moving from Aries.
Hey, Ari, I wanted to share that I've known you for a long time now, and I've watched that evolve in you. So, the polarity of Taurus is Scorpio, and, there's a need to just, there's a need to evolve that archetype within us. And I've witnessed that in you, because, a lot of times people that do work like this or have traveled for lifetimes in search of the truth, and have been betrayed by people that claim to know the truth, but you feel the truth in your body, right?
Yes.
It's a Taurus 9th house thing. It's like the body doesn't lie. You know the truth when you hear it. And so the truth is important to you, and what you feel to be true is important to you. When you interface with somebody that is talking about something they feel to be true, you're going to feel it in your body, and there will be a confrontation. And so there's a need, of course, to let go of the fixity in this example, so you can evolve and allow yourself to not hold on to anything too tightly, but to trust your own path and your own knowing, your body knowing what is true for you, and to trust that every step of the way.
Yes, absolutely. And so one of the main qualities of Taurus is self-esteem, self-worth, self-value. And when you put Chiron in Taurus, it's the wound of, I don't have what it takes. I don't have any value. There can be a permeating wound in self-worth and self-esteem with Chiron and Taurus in the second house. So, coming back to mine, Taurus in the ninth house, it's, I don't have the ability to find the truth within myself, which then equals identifying and holding on to values and truths and ideas that I've adopted but aren't indigenous to who I am. So there's an inherent quality for me of almost never really knowing if I can believe myself, and finding that it's not about that. It's about the present moment and trusting my own self in the moment. And the self-doubt is there. It's just a part of the journey, but it's also brought me so deeply into knowing that I can't settle for something that deprives me of my own worth, my own value, my own divine right to find the truth within. And that's thus set me apart. And that Chiron, that's a big expression of the work that I do in the world. It's helping other people to validate and affirm their own value, the truth that's true for them. So when we look at,
I just wanted to add, it made me think something, or reminded me of Yogananda's teachings as it relates to being limited by the form that the soul lives in, right? That as we evolve, we can only know so much because we're limited by this container. And even in his own experience, when Yukastar wrapped him on the chest because Yogananda wanted to experience God, and he leaves his body and he's flying all over the universe and experiencing God in this very galactic way. And at some point, he's thrown back into the body, and he says he's thrown back into the humiliating cage of the body. And he's reminded of and even then, after having this experience, leaving his body and being shown the nature of God in a very cosmic, expanded way, he still is, when he comes back into the body, he says, but I want to know God. He still couldn't grasp it all. It was too immense to even begin to grasp. And the grief and the gravity of coming back into the body was almost too much, to bear. And that is such a Taurian thing in that way. But also the wound, the healing of that wound, or to be able to not fix it but heal it, to understand it, is to know that I will always have limits in this form. Always. Even when my body tells me that something is true, I will never know the totality of the truth in this form. It's not possible.
Beautiful. And what Taurus really teaches us is it's really always about referencing our personal preferences. Like, what would I like? What makes me feel comfortable? And so I figured I would show my chart here because I have a little story to tell, and it feels relevant. So I'm recording an album right now, and this album is a message. It's the purest expression of my truth that I've ever ventured to bring forth into the world. It has a lot of meaning to me. And also sharing Taurus voice, sharing my voice with the world, and song and grace and embodiment. There's something very pure and real and important for me in that. I put the completion of this album off for 3 years because whenever I would listen to the songs that I've recorded, I would hear how it sounds and I wouldn't like it. And I would try to fit myself into the form that I already established. And after lots of soul searching and a lot of guidance, I finally came to the realization that my work is to listen to my music and take no account for how it sounds right now, but really ask myself, what would I like it to sound like? And I had a dream a few nights ago that actually did it for me. In the dream, I posed the question, do I have permission to change my songs however I see fit? And having worked with a lot of different recording artists, which are kind of teacher archetypes, like people that know the way, they have recorded their albums, all that, they have their ideas and their opinions. There's been a journey of retreating from all of it and giving myself permission to make my music how I see fit. What's my message, how I want to express it? So to me, that really encapsulates my Chiron experience of feeling a deep sense of, I can't make a beautiful album. I can't share my message authentically, ninth house Taurus. And facing that and realizing, oh my God, this is such a vulnerable, intimate place that only I can validate. Only I can listen to this music and determine how I want it to be. And so what's going to be coming forth with this music is something that I feel is very Chironic. It's something that can only come from my intimacy with my heart. That can only come from intimacy with myself. So
it's amazing because, go back really quick to that chart.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll go back.
Sorry. It'll just be brief.
Yeah.
So in evolutionary astrology, we're always looking at everything all at once, but we start with Pluto. Of course, it's sitting in their second house, which is a Taurus house.
Yeah.
Venus is balsamic to that Pluto, which rules your Chiron and Taurus. And Venus also does connect to music and what means something to you, the value that your experience here holds. And there is something that needs to heal, come full circle, linked with your music relative to this journey. And the timing is really ideal right now. So just wanted people to take to look at that Pluto Venus balsamic, that Venus ruling his Chiron and Taurus.
Yeah, and while you're there, so Venus rules that Taurus. It's also in conjunct. And so this kind of qualifies a little more of the nature of the wound.
Definitely.
What are the values and the beliefs that I'm adopting? Venus in Libra conjunct Pluto, that of other people, and I end up losing my soul, giving myself, my body, my life, my possessions, my money, my esteem to how other people live, making that my own truth, which requires self-convincing, ninth house. But the Venus ruling that Taurus says, I need to find my way, second house, Pluto, evolve. What's the path of my own soul? And for Libra, for my relationships to support me in my essence, to meet me where I am, not the other way around.
Right.
So like there's even guilt and like, is it okay for me to affirm what I want? Well, it's my album. Yes, it's okay. Like I actually have to go through that process. It's interesting.
Oh man. That's great.
All right. So let's talk a little more about just the Taurus energy. As I mentioned, it's really about self-esteem and self-worth, and we need to feel like we are in possession of our life, not in a way where we're stuck and we're controlling and like we're possessing, but a sense of this is my life, right? My body, my hands, my home, my values. And it's a divine right for the incarnate soul to know who they are in this physical form. If we can't know ourselves, how we choose to live, what our values are, then we really can't cooperate with evolution because we're not here. We need to be embodied and really be able to say, this is how I'm choosing to live. And that's how the evolutionary journey can actually commence, by really being here. There's also a biological component, right? Second house, survival. People procreate. So there's a quality of being attuned to the procreative force. So even being attractive, being appealing on a very base biological level is connected to the second house. So that can also constitute one sense of self-esteem. Of course, all of these things as well can become materialism, where one defines or values their own worth according to their outer attractiveness, according to the form or the wealth that they have. So values that actually aren't so much about really connecting with the life force of one's existence and owning it. but more of a sense of I feel safe. I'm able to secure my own survival because of these things. And that's that classic frog in the well, holding on to a little reality that you know. And these are my possessions. This is my body. This is how I make money. So with Taurus second house, we can also fall into a stagnation and a stasis in becoming very fixed in our values, but not really thriving, not really living, not really connecting and feeling. Feeling and sensation is very much a part of the Taurus second house archetype, because survival isn't just like food, water, shelter. Our ability to receive, our ability to physically sense our senses, to connect and experience our senses, which means if the senses are cluttered with stimulation and numbing out and distraction and dissociation, then we can't really receive, which means the potency of our life is numbed. But if our senses are clear, if we're content with the present moment, we're happy with ourselves, we know what we have, we love what we have, we know who we are, then we can experience more with less. And we can really relate to our senses in a way that respects and honors the temple of the body. So the ability to receive, to feel life force in our own body in the present moment is a big part of Taurus. It takes survival beyond just, purely instinctive, I got to survive and make sure I'm living. It takes it to a more elevated state. Well, I don't know if you can hear the wind, but there's huge wind. It's knocking my van over. This is crazy.
Oh my, it's knocking your van over. I hope not.
I'm going to put my parking brake on. Hold on one moment.
Okay.
All right. Wow. Yeah, I'm parked by the ocean. There's a big storm last night, and now it's just raining and winding. All right, so that's Taurus. Let's start looking at some charts and apply Chiron in the second house. And here's this beautiful image that Kristin found. And I think this so beautifully exemplifies just the solo energy of Taurus. And solo is different than the solo of Aries. Taurus is about being alone with oneself.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an embodied sensual quality to this image that I just love.
Definitely. I know. And look at her. She's just on the earth, right?
Yes.
She's standing there on the earth.
Yeah. And
she's all good, just out here on my own.
Yeah. So nice. All right. Freddie Mercury. If you haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody, go and see it. It's a really good movie. I enjoyed it. So, have you seen it?
I haven't, but I love Queen. I mean, I grew up with that band. I have older brothers, and
cool.
Yeah.
So, just to offer a little context for his chart, one of the main features here is Pluto, Saturn, Leo in the 12th house. He had a calling for fame, larger than life, right? He was a larger than life performer, and he became that. An authority in his own right. And it took trusting in himself, trusting in his soul's path, because he pushed forward from being a nobody to being a somebody in a social sense. Uh-huh. And the context for that is hard work. Mm-hmm. Right? Hard work to succeed. He has Virgo sun in the first house, which is I'm on a path, got work to do, squaring the nodes. The resolution node here being Gemini in the 10th house, building his career, building his status. He had a goal to reach in this life. And he was committed to that. What I want to tune into here is his Chiron in Libra, conjunct Mars, conjunct Jupiter, and conjunct Venus, all in the second house. One of the most interesting features about his singing is his mouth. Mm-hmm. He had very buck teeth. And one of the reasons, purportedly, why he did not get it worked on was because to do so, in his view, would be to actually potentially diminish his singing ability. He had 4 extra teeth in the back that apparently made his mouth wider, which increased, according to him, his vocal range.
Wow.
And so he kept it because he recognized that this seeming inadequacy, this fault, was also a gift. And it was not something he wasn't vulnerable about. He was very vulnerable, and I took a couple notes on this here. He was incredibly self-conscious. He was known to often cover his mouth and kind of, hide his teeth from being seen. He was, of course, made fun of a lot when he was younger. And one thing that's very much a part of his own soul journey is, and this is kind of the Leo piece, is he really needed to be loved. He really, really needed to be loved. And he really cared to know that other people were loving him and admiring him and respecting him. And one of the challenges with Libra in the 2nd house is developing value and esteem in oneself, rooted in oneself, not rooted in other people. And so there's a very potent quality of him setting himself apart and being different. Jupiter conjunct Chiron in Libra in the 2nd house. That Jupiter rules the South Node in Sag in the 4th. He came from, I believe, the Pakistani, and I'm not remembering, I think it was that, but definitely an Eastern background. So he was different. He came from a very different culture, different reality. And his whole life, in many ways, was about coming to terms with who he is. He changed his name. He didn't actually want to bring a lot of attention to his own personal culture. And that was a big deal in terms of his relationship with his father. And I'm kind of just following the movie. But I fact-checked that that was accurate. But I should be honest that I'm, just watched the movie. So there's tension between his relationship with his father but changing his name, 4th house, to Freddie Mercury from his name that was more traditional. The Jupiter in Libra in the 2nd house with Chiron and Venus there is, I am going to really trust my own values and believe in myself and follow that route. It ultimately expressed to the lover that he chose. He had a marriage with a woman and realized while being on tour that he was bisexual. And eventually he opened up his sexuality. He expanded it to include more. And so his journey in so many ways was about really trusting himself and letting his relationships come and meet him where he was at. But I wanted to just really emphasize that Chiron piece. Also conjunct Mars. Mars in Libra in the 2nd house also is a very, very sexual energy, very creative energy. So all of this was being channeled into song in many ways. This speaks to his amazing grace as a singer and in creating music. And Libra is also, I find, piano. He was a beautiful pianist. So that's just
I
one
often
little
see,
perspective.
the Venus in Libra, oftentimes, or even Mercury in Libra, it can equal like beautiful voice, I've noticed. And also to have Jupiter conjunct Venus in Libra in the 2nd, I mean, just
Big,
all
beautiful.
this energy around music and song, and wow, it's an exceptional chart, really, for like, this is a chart, if it landed in my lap early on and someone came in as a teenager, I'd be like, whoa, this is big, so a lot to, and yes, I mean, so many themes here around not just moving away from his family of origin, this international theme you can see here, pulling away from that. The 2nd house, 4th house emphasis is so much around making a world on his own and moving away from where he'd been, and this gypsy spirit. He totally looks like a gypsy spirit up there.
Totally.
Very just nomadic within himself and open to everything.
Yes.
You can see even the sexual extremes. Libra we consider being extreme, and part of that potential for extremity, and a part of that air trine being able to go either way or be both or just swing strongly in another direction sexually. But yeah, this is a powerful chart along these lines. And so I haven't seen the movie, and I don't know his personal story around financial stuff. Was there anything that fell apart that way?
No, not fell apart. His finances only Jupiter. It only grew.
Grew. Awesome.
And the movie's pretty accurate. The things that it didn't get right were the timelines. It kind of changed the timelines for the most part to make it fit. But the storyline, like the essence of it, is accurate, as far as I understand. And one piece here is he did die of complications from HIV.
Okay.
And that once he opened up his sexuality, there's actually a phase where he was exploring it a lot. And so that's also that Jupiter. And then I think that Chiron right there also speaks to wounding through sexuality.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a good moment to sort of speak a little bit in general to the Chiron in the second house archetype, because the kind of wounding that a soul can experience here can happen through experiences that deeply affect one's sense of value and one's sense of self-esteem, one's self-worth. So in this case, having a disease, right? And then and that affects how you look. It affects everything about you. And then not being able to share sexual energy in the same way. Other examples of where Chiron in the second house can affect or reflect a permeating sense of woundedness in one's self-esteem is issues with poverty, right? Like not having the resources and the money that you need to survive. And I've seen that so many times with Kyra in the second house, and it's not necessarily a reality where someone in this life doesn't even have the money, but there's like an underlying feeling of like a memory of having lived on a farm and the crops being devastated and you can't feed your family. It's like peak experiences that relate to not having the necessary material means. So poverty, being in a situation where there's a feeling of brokenness through not being able to meet one's basic survival needs. And that can be a thing like food, water, shelter. One thing I'll also want to say just in general about Chiron in the second house is, as I mentioned, we want to feel attractive, right? It's a biological need to feel I'm attractive, I'm valuable. And so there could also be experiences where there's been violations that then affects one's sense of self-worth and value, or where there's something permeating about one's actual physical biology that makes them feel like I'm not, suitable as a partner, right? Like I can't produce the necessary eggs or seeds that will make me adequate as a procreative choice for the survival of the species, or experiences that actually inhibit that within oneself. So
yeah,
sexual inadequacies, issues with biological functions, those can all be expressions of Chiron in the second house as well.
Gosh, I was just thinking he was 45 years old when he died. That's so young. And when you were talking, this is how crazy it is, because maybe it's his music that's lived on in a way that I was like, wait, he died? I'm still sitting here. Even though I remember when it happened. It was 1991. It was a long time ago, but it's this experience with that Pluto balsamic to Saturn in the 12th, because his, music has lived on far beyond his legacy, living years. I'm like, wait, no, he died, but it's that kind of, the music, the life, his life lives on, reflected in these symbols at the same time.
Yeah, indeed. Let's go to, there's another chart that I feel is very similar. That's worthy to look at.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. This
contrast.
Definitely. Oh dear.
Here we go.
Okay, so here's the financial wound where he's wounded others in particular, I would say.
Yeah. and also an underlying sense of self-insufficiency. I don't have
Oh
enough.
my gosh.
I need to Jupiter Chiron in a second. I need to lie and pretend I have more than I do. And lying to others, manipulating. Well, so Chiron in the second house can be wounding that's created through an orientation of self-interest, using or commodifying others to accommodate for one's own sense of value and worth. And this is a prime example of how this soul has done that, taking advantage of other people's resources. And, you know, Libra is a sweet talker. Libra, Jupiter is a salesperson, sweet talker, can convince other people, make other people feel attractive, feel that, oh, yes, you'll be my business partner. Yes, you'll be my consort. Yes, I'll pay you off. Yes, we'll open up this casino. Yes, you'll make a lot of money. And Neptune's in there, it's deceit. So we have all these situations where he's actually created poverty. He's created financial hardships for other people. I come from New Jersey, so I know the example of that in Atlantic City, where he opened up his casino and devastated the community. A casino that actually went bankrupt. But it was built entirely upon lie after lie after lie, not actually performing.
I wanted to take note here that this chart, I mean, think about it, has got Jupiter and Chiron are both in the second in Libra. South Node and the Moon are conjunct in the fourth. North Node and Uranus conjunct in the 10th, and Pluto's in the 12th, exactly like Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
But all these other symbols are different. I mean, and you have to look at these charts, like at the stage of evolution. You know, what are the choices these people are making? Male, female, you know, where are they on the wheel? I know that I read at some point that, especially with the Neptune in the second, can be retrograde here in Libra. And he is someone who's lost and earned or gained more money than anyone in history, probably. Like that Neptune can be like all this money coming in and then all of it coming out the bottom, you know, like in and then out. It's this water through your hands. They can't hold on to it. So of course, not only the wound that he has experienced through multiple bankruptcies, I'm sure, but also, of course, as you mentioned, wounding others with his lies. And wow, and everything is emphasized with that stationary Jupiter, ruler of his south node, which is also station, which a stationary planet and the nodes is a seminal life. It's a prominent focus that is exaggerated or emphasized or highlighted as we are living witnesses of right now.
Indeed. And also sexual wounding, right? Making other women feel loved, feel attractive, feel wanted, feel special. That Leo combined with the Libra in the second house, and then just completely using them. How he relates to women and sexuality as commodities. There's no respect or value to women at all.
Right.
And of course, that's ruled by Saturn with Venus and Cancer in the 11th house, totally dissociated, disconnect. So,
wow, that was quite a
good example.
example.
And let's take it a little further. He just shut down the government for 35 days. At the time of this recording, we just reopened the government. We don't know what's going to happen after this recording, but we're in January 2019, if you remember that time in history. So, okay, that just happened. And the whole reality of that is 800,000 plus people, no paycheck. People had to go on food stamps. People had to get second jobs. People had to go to shelters to get food. So there's a direct reality of I am creating financial wounding and affecting people's livelihood, people's self-worth, their self-esteem, taking their livelihood away from them, all because of his own deeply distorted racial I got to prove myself and meet up my campaign promise and create. And the whole notion of creating a wall is really that separation, which is a pivotal part of his own consciousness reflected in his nodal axis in the 4th and the 10th house. And this need to be on top, Leo.
Well, that's Saturn, Venus, and Cancer in the 11th.
Right. Boundaries, keep them out. Yeah.
That Venus rules the Chiron and Libra in the second house, right? So this is this rune right here is a reflection of a theme that, of course, everything is in process right now. We'll find out, but just the family money, the family, the power the family had. I mean, they could all be going down financially.
Yeah.
As a result of choices made. So
that's a good point you made. It's, Venus ruling that Libra. It's wounding. One aspect of that is to groups of people, minority groups of people, or groups of people that don't fit into the echelon that he's associated with.
Right. Yes. The Saturn rules his sixth house, so those that have less.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, and that's the deceit part, his base in the United States are primarily people that have less as well.
Rural, right.
So they're all being deceived as well.
Totally. Absolutely.
All right. Let's go to a different vibration. Mother Teresa. So this is a really different and good example of Chiron. I think maybe we talked about her a couple years ago when we did our intro to Chiron. So here we have Chiron in Pisces in the second house. And I'm going to read some excerpts that I found on Wiki that just like so perfectly and beautifully expresses this. She started Missionaries of Charity, and the members took the vow of chastity, poverty, and obedience, and wholehearted free service to the poorest of the poor. So giving infinite resources, right? Abundant resources from source indiscriminately to those who need it. Pisces in the second house. But there being a deep permeating distress and suffering within the soul. And so I want to bring out the Chiron brokenness and woundedness, and also where the soul has affected that for other people. So I'm going to read a criticism that I found in a wiki.
Okay.
One of Teresa's most outspoken critics was English journalist Christopher Hitchens. He wrote, "This returns us to the medieval corruption of the church, which sold indulgences to the rich while preaching hellfire and continence to the poor. Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor, she was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God. She spent her life opposing the only known cure for poverty, which is the empowerment of women and the emancipation of them from a livestock version of compulsory reproduction. Teresa was adamantly against abortion. And so in her life, she didn't support people to move out of their suffering. She actually had this very distorted Judeo-Christian cosmology that people's suffering was actually good for them. And so this reflects obviously a deeply distraught aspect within her own consciousness. It's that Chiron squares her nodes and also opposes the Virgo sun in the 8th house, which speaks to a deep permeating sense of unworthiness and guilt, that there's something I need to suffer for, to atone for, to alleviate the sense of being wrong in some permeating way. And that being mixed in with a genuine compassion and love for people, this desire to serve, and she was indiscriminate. She, Pluto in Gemini in the 7th, one beautiful feature of her path was she allowed people to worship however they wanted to. She wasn't about converting them to Catholicism. She gave everyone the space to find God in their own way. And that's really beautiful. And that's one thing that really speaks to the purity of our own heart. But the the reality of the wounded healer, which is a Chiron thing here. So her inner being feeling spiritual poverty, a deep spiritual poverty. I am disconnected from God. I am impoverished. In fact, she's had the experience before she opened up her missionaries of having nothing for herself, but following this calling from spirit and needing to trust. Here's a little statement here. Our Lord wants me to be a free nun covered with the poverty of the cross. Today I learned a good lesson. The poverty of the poor must be so hard for them. While looking for a home, I walked and walked till my arms and legs ached. I thought how much they must ache in body and soul looking for a home, food, and health. Then the comfort of Loreto, her former congregation, came to tempt me. She had the thought, you have only to say the word and all that will be yours again, the comfort of her congregation in the past. The tempter kept on saying, of free choice, my God, and out of love for you, I desire to remain and do whatever be your holy will in my regard. And I did not let a single tear come. So she chose poverty. She chose to not have the comforts so that she can be available and in service to the poor, and yet also perpetuated this notion of staying in poverty. And it's a very important lesson with Pisces. You don't ultimately heal suffering through suffering.
Right. It's actually not what God would want.
No,
Right.
it's
The
a
degree of
big,
masochism, just total.
yeah.
One thing I remember too is that very much is that while traveling by train to convent from Calcutta for an annual retreat, she had written about experiencing the call within the call, which was being on the train and having Jesus literally materializing in the seat next to her to tell her that what her new life would be, to leave the convent, to help the poor and to the poor masses, and to live among them.
Yes.
And so and you can see that with the natal Pluto in Gemini and the 7th making an inconjunct to her south node in Scorpio, the call within the call. Also, Pluto Gemini in the 7th is squaring Mercury in Virgo in the 9th. And Venus, the ruler of her north node and moon in Taurus, is in Leo in the 8th and is squaring Saturn retrograde in the 4th. So the call, as she put it, was an order. And to fail him would have been to break the faith.
Beautiful.
And so what happened, though, she had this incredible experience, spiritual experience, Piscean experience, Neptunian experience, and then never had it again. So her whole entire life was about maintaining the faith no matter what. And even at the end of her life, there are all these stories around she had heart issues and this heartbreak that she felt, that she couldn't connect to Jesus, that she was not feeling him. And so it created all this doubt in her.
Wow.
And she she did in her diaries renounce this faith, and these diaries were discovered, but it was never had become public. It never came out of her mouth, but they were discovered. Oh yeah. Wow. And so this wounding around, did I imagine all of this, right? Chiron and Pisces retrograde, and did that really happen? Right. It's just so intense. And you can see how the Mars in the 9th in Virgo, with Mercury in Virgo squaring her Pluto, ruler of her south node, this doubt that just crippled her, ultimately broke her heart. I mean, her Venus and Leo in the 8th is squaring her Saturn. And so this is, all these, I think she had 3 separate heart attacks or something later in life. And that was, in fact, the thing that finally took her. So she dies of a massive heart attack at the age of 87 years old when Pluto and Sag was squaring her sun. So anyway, this is, I feel like people that, obviously she was a devout Catholic, and, a big part of that is we must suffer as Jesus suffered. It's a classic 7th house phenomena. Somebody was just writing about it on the message board. Like, it's so hard to feel good when someone that I love is suffering. It's very hard to, and of course that's true, but I feel like Mother Teresa believed that we must suffer as Jesus suffered.
Yeah, she did.
And that was all a delusion, Pisces.
Her wording is, our Lord wants me to be a free nun covered with the poverty of the cross.
Yeah.
That wording right there. And yet we speak to, why would a soul create that kind of experience? I mean, she was such a great example of the wounded healer. And then you could also question, like, to what extent was it healing, right? Obviously there wasn't perfection in it, because this reflected her own psychology of masochism. But we'd ask, like, why would she endure all of that? And we look at this chart, and it's very clear that those same symbols speak to having espoused a very strong shaming and psychology of inferiority and harshness, right? This is like the taskmaster, Mars and Virgo in the ninth house, religious belief systems that actually shame and alienate people. So part of her own journey, and I think where she really evolved, and maybe even through experiencing her own self-doubt, faced, perhaps on a soul level or even after this lifetime, a lot of the core beliefs she's held, having a conviction, following her path of service, and then her path, being open to other people, right? Being open to other ways. She was not dogmatic about the Catholicism, but she was dogmatic about her deeply internalized need for suffering.
Right.
But
that was a leap, for sure. That was a leap right there.
Absolutely. Must have been. Yeah.
I forgot about that. That's true. That's amazing, actually. Because she does have this Mother Superior signature.
Yeah.
All over. And very fixed in her ways and her beliefs and what she feels is necessary in order to see your maker, right? Or experience your maker, or she might have put it. But that is a leap right there, being open to all faiths, not judging others. And, there must have been an echo of that in her soul coming into this life, or just knowing that coming out of another life and harshly judging other faiths or ways, separation, exclusion, kind of one way or no way. That must have, that wound is in her, and a memory of it coming into this life, for her to have been able to have that kind of openness and acceptance and allowing other people to worship as they wished. That's amazing.
Totally. Yeah.
I wanted to add one more thing, Ari, before we move on. This feeling of aloneness, like the image of the woman standing there. And of course, Mother Teresa was never alone. She was around so many people all the time, people that were suffering, but within her own soul felt totally abandoned and totally alone. In fact, toward the end of her life, there's a picture of her reaching out to the Pope in desperation, really just wanting some connection or experience of God. And there's a picture of her reaching out to the Pope and receiving very little response or empathy from him. And it appeared to magnify this inner feeling of loneliness and emptiness.
Wow.
And this was, 1983, I think, that I was looking in my notes. She had a heart attack while visiting the Pope at that time, and she had already had it. And in this picture, she's reaching out to him and getting really nothing in return. And it makes me think a bit, too, about the planet Uranus she has in Capricorn. It's retrograde, and it rules her second house cusp, Uranus, right? Because it's Aquarius there. When a soul has Uranus retrograde, they can have a certain sort of vibration or energy that repels people in a way, or creates this so totally different. And it's intended by the soul, so they are thrown back on themselves, to be able to be strong in themselves. There's always this feeling of alienation, not fitting in, not being like anybody else. And here she is reaching out in this time of need and getting nothing back after the life she had lived and felt she had done for God, for Jesus. Oh my gosh, it's just amazing, that Chiron.
This seems to be a part of the further individuation from mainstream constructs of thought that do not resonate with her true soul essence. That there's a religious authority now, Capricorn, and there's no response. And that was the process for her whole life. Is she was either wholeheartedly accepted and deified, or wholeheartedly rejected by all kinds of groups during her lifetime, and even after her lifetime. So I just love what you spoke about, and being completely thrown back upon herself. And I feel like this is a part of her own soul evolutionary process in questioning the context and the framework from which she's even living her life in the first place. I want to offer something about this Pisces in a second, Chiron, And this wouldn't necessarily be true for her soul necessarily, but just to exemplify this teaching, potentially this kind of Chiron signature, what would it look like to kind of get beyond that threshold of feeling a permeating sense of doubt and brokenness? Because Chiron doesn't have to be where you do healing work in the world and you also feel like a wreck the whole time. Like, it's not the end goal.
Oh.
It often is, but it doesn't have to be. There can be a deep opening to one's pain. And in this case, theoretically, if the opening to one pain here could take the expression of, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know. I accept that I feel lost. I accept my poverty. I don't know if God wants me. And it's like to actually embrace that, because what comes with that is the shattering of all the ideals and notions that she's created about reality. Like, everything else would then go out of the window. Everything she's believed about Jesus and suffering, and how she needs to live a pure life, in really embracing that deep sense of inner poverty, it can break her open, and something else could come in that space. And to speak about Chiron in the second house in general, one of the overcompensatory features of Chiron in the second house is this facade of cool. Like, I'm cool, I'm collected, I got it all together, I'm a whole person. But on the inside, there can be this really deep feeling of, I'm not worth anything. I don't have what I need. I don't have the support I need. I'm not adequate. I don't have the stamina and the efficiency and the ability and the value. And so to actually open one's heart to that experience of being inadequate, of being unattractive, of being, useless and valueless, there can be within a soul, any soul with Chiron in the second house, this beautiful opening into a value and a worth that comes from being connected with one's own heart. It's like that takes us into a place of, what does it look like to live my life when I'm intimate with my own heart, when I'm intimate with my own vulnerability? Like, there could be music there can be art there can be a life full of meaning and richness that only comes from actually connecting with one's true present moment experience. Other than that, the shadow with this Chiron in the second can be getting very fixed in a life of seeming doing it well, doing just fine, but actually on the inside feeling empty.
Gosh, that was right on, and interesting that Chiron in Pisces, Pisces rules the 12th, Neptune rules the 12th in the sign of Pisces, and that natural sextile from Taurus to Pisces, or Taurus to the 12th, is with our 2-7-12 diagram, our essential needs. That's the doorway in to the ideal. That is the doorway into the experience of unconditional love through that sextile. Remember, the 12th house, the second house form in conjunct to the 7th, where her Pluto sits, right? Looking outside ourselves for validation, or even in her case, maybe looking outside of herself through in the experience of her connection, whether it's to the Pope or whoever else. But her own limits within her faith. And the wound speaking to, you have to turn in and tune in and find that within yourself. Find that healing, that unconditional love within yourself through the inner door, not the outer door.
Yeah. Very real, very true. I'm tempted to, I'll just share this about my story, and then we should probably start closing.
Yeah.
The Taurus in second house has a lot of energy. Right? There's a lot of creative energy, a lot of sexual energy. And this energy needs to circulate. If it doesn't circulate, it stagnates. And if it stagnates, it can create all kinds of issues in the body-mind system. And something that I found for myself with my Chiron in Taurus in the 9th house, just before I accepted that I'm going to make this music my own, there is this permeating sense of not being in my body, right? It just feeling like, no, I have no worth, I have no value. And this feeling like I can't even imagine anyone would be attracted to me. And then the temptation, like the movement, is to go towards indulgence in food and to numb my senses, to completely distract myself and disconnect from my own body. And I do this really beautiful practice, actually, where I allow myself to dip into that consciously. I allow myself to fall into the low self-worth. I'm like, okay, I'm going to let myself like move into the position of low self-esteem, low self-worth. I am worth nothing. I can't do it. I have no value. My songs aren't meaningful. I'm never going to do it well. I let myself go into that, and I give myself permission to like sit in my bed. And I think a few nights ago, just before I turned the corner, I'm like, I'm just going to watch YouTube videos and put a bowl of cashews with honey. And I just ate honey and cashews because it's what I had. And like the laziness of like, I don't want to make food, but what do I have? Cashews and honey. So I just gave myself permission, knowing it's not healthy, but there's something about like opening my heart to the coziness and the intimacy of just feeding myself. And even though it's like on one level of perception, a numbing. So I want to offer that to everyone. There's something really powerful with Chiron in the second house. And you can just make this a second house teaching when it relates to not feeling good about who we are. There's medicine in letting that become its own dance for a little bit consciously. It's like, let's play that out a little bit. But if it's not conscious, that's where the wounding really happens. That's where I can actually hurt myself, because then I'm actually creating a living reality of self-hurt and not honoring my body, not honoring my worth.
Yeah, if it persists.
Yeah. If it's not owned, if it's not claimed with love.
Mm-hmm.
So we got some more charts, Caitlyn Jenner, Charles Manson, but we're going to end it here.
Oh yeah, this is great. If anybody does have any specific area of evolutionary astrology that you would like us to discuss on Guiding Stars, please do email me. And Ari, I always love gathering with you, and it's always a joy anytime we have space together. And I just love this hour and hour plus on Chiron in the second. And anybody who has, or Taurus, anyone who has this signature, I'm sure they were all feeling in full what we were sharing and talking about. And so thank you so much for being on this journey with me.
Thank you as well, Kristin. It's good to share this with you.
All right. Well, we will be back next month looking at Chiron in the third house, or Chiron in Gemini. And we'll be also back here in a few days, or actually next week. We've got a couple shows coming up with David Green, Simon Forrester, and Rose Marcus in the next month. So until next time, namaste.